what is GDP? What is gross domestic product? It is a measure of economic activity in a country. If you say that a country has high GDP, that means there is a lot of economic activity in country. So GDP measures the value of all goods and services that has been produced in a country. So high GDP means you are generating high employment, and high GDP means you are reducing poverty. So GDP measures how well a country economy is doing. But there are some limitations. I will come to that. So how can you calculate GDP? There are three different ways in which you can calculate GDP. One is income-based approach, other production-based, and the third one expenditure-based. The simplest of all this is income-based approach. Simplest means, I mean, it is simplest for us to understand. Of course, production and expenditure are also simpler, but I'll take the income approach. So simply what I do is I calculate income of everyone living in India, and I sum up all the incomes. So this is the GDP of Indian economy. So for example, in our group, in our lecture, there are like 10-15 people are there now. So if I sum up the income of all the people in the group, then what we get is the GDP of our group. So clearly from this, you know that more number of people means more GDP, less number of people means less GDP. So this is the limitation. Like if you see India has very large population, 135 crores. So of course, India will have high GDP. China will also have high GDP, but Sweden has only 1 crore population. So Sweden will have less GDP. So this is the limitation in taking the full GDP. In GDP, there are two types of things, nominal GDP versus real GDP. I think many people don't understand the difference. Like whenever I see some news programs, even some journalists also don't know what is difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. So this is very important distinction what one should make. So I'll give a small example to understand the difference. I'll compare petrol prices. Let's say in 2020, petrol price is 100 rupees per liter, just an assumption for making our calculation easy. And let's say in 2021, it is 110 rupees. In 2020, it was 100 rupees. In 2021, it is 110 rupees. So the percentage of increase is 10%. Price is increased by 10%. When you calculate GDP, if you get like 100 units in 2020, you will get 110 units in 2021. So when you do this 110 minus 100, you will get as 10% growth rate in GDP. But this is not a real growth. This is called nominal growth because the actual growth is not there. But the growth is there because you are taking the price rise. That is called inflation.
Inflation.
Yeah, this is inflation. So because of the inflation, you are seeing the growth in GDP rate. This is not real GDP. This is called nominal GDP. To get real GDP, you have to take the nominal GDP and then take out the inflation part. That means you take 110 minus 10, 100. 2020, 100 GDP units. 2021 also 100 GDP units. So you did not get any GDP growth rate in real. But in nominal terms, you got GDP growth rate. So this is the thing we have to understand. Like whenever Prime Minister says that India is a $2.9 trillion economy and we want to become a $5 trillion economy, the question that anyone should ask, our opposition leaders or any common man should ask is whether you are talking about nominal GDP or real GDP. And one more thing, one problem with GDP is whenever a country has high population, this country will have high GDP. China has high GDP, India has high GDP because you are adding incomes of 135 crore people or 145 crore people. So you will get high GDP. So GDP in itself is meaningless. It's not representative of the economy. So you have to use something called per capita GDP. What is this per capita GDP? Take the GDP, divide by population of the country. So GDP per person is called per capita GDP. This is more meaningful than GDP. Even per capita GDP is also not very representative sometimes. For example, let's take one example. Now in Sweden, I'm buying 1 kg rice at 25 Swedish crowns. The same rice, if I want to buy in India, it costs like 50 rupees, I think, right now, or maybe higher, I'm not sure, but approximately 50 rupees. So that means if whatever money I am spending, whatever money units I'm spending here is double the money units that I'll be spending to buy same quantity of rice. So I am here paying rent of 7,000 units, but in India I am paying the rent of, let's say, 14,000 rupees, 14,000 units. So one Swedish unit is equal to 2 Indian units, according to me. Like if I neglect everything else, if I assume that I am only living in my apartment, eating rice, doing nothing else, I'm working from home, then one Swedish unit is equal to 2 Indian units. So if I am getting like 25,000 units of money in Sweden, I should get 50,000 units of money in India for having the same standard of living. So this factor has to be accounted in the calculation of GDP. Otherwise, the calculation is not good. So we have to talk about per capita GDP, and we have to consider the unit conversion, that is purchasing power. Whatever purchasing power I have with 25,000 units of money in Sweden, the same purchasing power I have with 50,000 units of money in India. So according to me, the effective exchange rate is only 2 units, but the real exchange rate, the market exchange rate is higher. It's 8 units, but the real exchange, the effective exchange rate is only 2 units. So this thing we have to consider. Otherwise, the calculation is not much meaningful. So we have to take per capita GDP, and then we have to take per capita GDP on purchasing power parity. Then only it makes meaningful sense. So this is the introduction to GDP. Now we'll go to some results and discussion. Let's start with India's GDP. India's total GDP is 2 trillion US dollars in 2019. So it is one of the biggest GDPs. India is third largest in purchasing power parity. As I told you, anything you want to compare, you have to compare purchasing power parity. So China ranks 1, US ranks 2, India ranks 3. Probably you all might be knowing why China ranks 1. You, Kiran?
Yes, sir. All the production are going in China, sir.
No, China has large population. That's why China ranking 1. India has large population. That's why India is ranking 3. Not because of the development, of course. But when you calculate per capita GDP based on purchasing power parity, then you see how badly India is doing. 124th rank India has. That means 123 countries are richer. They have more purchasing power than what India has. And how bad China is doing. 72 countries are more richer than China. They have high purchasing power. But you see US rank 2 in largest GDP, rank 7 in per capita GDP. Only 6 countries are doing better than US. Only 14 countries are having better purchasing power than Germany. Only 15 countries are having better purchasing power than Sweden. So your per capita GDP purchasing power parity is a proper indicator of how well an economy is doing, right? So maybe Singapore or something has is top in per capita GDP purchasing power parity. Luxembourg, Singapore, these countries are more richer. They have more purchasing power. So the difference between these two, you can understand the GDP purchasing power parity and per capita GDP purchasing power parity. So one thing good for India is India has large amounts of money as a total, because we can spend in defense. This money we can spend in like defense research or something. But if you take individual purchasing power, it is less. If you take Sweden wants to invest in defense research or space research, it's difficult because the overall money Sweden has is less, although individuals has higher amounts of money. So this difference is very interesting and should be understood. So, and then yes, so the purchasing power is high, is very, very smaller in India and China if you compare with developed countries like the US, Sweden, Germany, France, and so on. So here we'll see how GDP per capita and purchasing power GDP per capita are changing from 1961 to 2019. The Indian economy can be divided into two parts: before privatization or before liberalization, that is before 1991, and after 1991. Before 1991, everything was controlled by government. If you want to do anything, you have to take the permission of the government, and there are so many rules. No private company can start. All jobs are given by government. If you want, for example, if you want to take a telephone connection, you have to approach government and you have to bribe the officials to get a telephone. Anything you want to do, you have to approach the government. There is no other way. There are no very, very small amounts of private enterprises. Jobs means only government jobs, no private jobs. So that means everything is in the command of the government. So the people call it the commanding heights of the economy. Who made the commands? The commands were made by the government. But from 1991 or in 1991, this situation changed. Prime Minister at the time, the Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, with the help of then Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, who authored these reforms, has implemented privatization and liberalization and globalization. So any company can come to India and start, for example, McDonald's, KFC, or Vivo, Oppo, all these companies are coming to India because of globalization. And other companies like Jio, Airtel, all these are private companies came because of privatization. So our economy became free from the shackles of the commanding government. So 1991 is a revolutionary change in Indian economy. And this is reflected in GDP growth rate, both in GDP per capita as well as GDP per capita purchasing power parity. You see that after the red colored line, there is an exponential growth in GDP. This is GDP per capita. That means purchasing power is going up clearly. Both GDP per capita and GDP per capita purchasing power parity is going up. So you clearly see that the purchasing power is going up. So there is no doubt beyond this that privatization is useful in increasing the purchasing power. But what about poverty? If you see there are two lines, you see the figure that is on the extreme right hand side. One orange colored line is poverty. Blue colored line is extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is defined by World Bank as less than 1.9 US dollar per day. Poverty is less than 5.5 US dollar per day. Extreme poverty has decreased. It has decreased from 60% to 6%. World Bank predicts that by 2030, there will be no extreme poverty in India. There will be zero extreme poverty. That means everyone can at least eat food. But poverty has not decreased that much. Poverty decreased only from 97% in 1980s. Poverty was 97%. In 2019 and all, it's around 80%. So the decrease is only 17%. That means India is still poor. 80% of India is still poor. This data is saying, I am not saying this, but not extremely poor. At least they can eat something, ration food or something they can eat. But still India is poor in terms of the income we earn per day. So why this has happened? Why privatization did not help to reduce poverty, although it reduced extreme poverty? Why did it not reduce poverty? The reason is twofold. First, all the liberalization and privatization is only for the industry. It's not related to agriculture. But Indian economy is mainly dependent on agriculture. We have not done any reforms in agriculture. This is one reason. The second reason is the privatization was partial, but there are so many public sector units, still they are running. This is other reason. There is also one more reason. Because of the privatization, the people that got benefited most was the corporate sector, the Ambanis, Adanis, Tatas and Birlas. They got benefited the most, and the benefit they got has not been passed to the poor people. That means they have not sufficiently given the money they got to the employees. They are paying less salaries. Maybe some companies like TCS and all, they're paying more salaries, but many companies are paying less salaries. So this is one reason. So there are total three reasons. People always talk about only one reason. That is that corporates are taking all the money and not giving to the people. Now we'll see. So far we have been discussing only about GDP and per capita GDP. But now we will see what is GDP growth rate, how it is affecting. GDP growth rate is increase in GDP divided by GDP. For example, if GDP is 100 units now, 110 units next year, so the increase is 10%. Of course, inflation you have to subtract. I told you now, inflation you have to subtract. After subtracting inflation, the growth is 10 units. So this is called GDP growth rate. That means you are growing 10% per year, which is if you grow 10%, then you will definitely become a developed economy. But India is not growing at 10%. It's growing at sometimes 5%, 4%, and during the COVID, it's minus 8%. It will probably be. So this is the problem. So now, as I told you, the curve you have to divide into two parts: before 1991 and after 1991. So before 1991, the average GDP growth rate is around 4.2%, 1960 to 1990. If you also add up 1950 to 1960, then the mean growth rate is only 3.5%. So this is very small growth rate. This is not sufficient to become a developed economy. But after 1991 reforms, the growth rate almost doubled from 3.5% to 6.4%. But still it's not sufficient because we need 10%. One more interesting point that you should note down from this graph is the fluctuations in GDP growth rate. The standard deviation is 3.4% before 1991. It's only 1.7% after 1991. That means we have become more stable after 1991. Earlier, we are growing, coming down, growing, coming down. There are lots of fluctuations. Fluctuations is not good for employment generation. So we are doing particularly well after 1991, but still 1.7 is very large fluctuation. Still, it's not good enough for a sustainable economic growth rate. And one thing you can note, like everyone knows, from 2016, India's GDP growth rate is continuously decreasing from 2016 to 2019 and continued in 2020 due to COVID crisis. And even if the COVID crisis was not there, still the economy will fall. This mainly people attribute this to demonetization. Our former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, said that demonetization is a monumental blunder which collapsed the GDP by 1%. 1% fall in GDP means very high increase in unemployment. But let's see what the data says. This data I have taken from RBI website. I have not plotted this. I have taken directly from the RBI. So here you see that the credit that banks are offering, the loans that banks are offering has decreased severely during the 2016 period after the demonetization. So because of which companies are not getting loans. Small and micro scale enterprises are not getting loans, so they collapsed. So demonetization collapsed small and micro scale enterprises. There are also other reasons why these enterprises collapsed. For example, the RBI interest rates was very high, so they borrowing at very high interest rates. So this is also one reason. But are there any other structural reasons? Like if you see any TV, they share demonetization is the reason for GDP decrease. And some people say GST is also the reason. But are there any other structural reasons, more fundamental reasons for the GDP fall? This is what I was interested in investigating. And rest of my talk is focused on what are the structural reasons that led to reducing GDP growth rate.